Good morning, everybody. We're glad that you can join us in this webinar this morning, focusing on the Vietnam Rural Water Project. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Leslie Villegas. I was the GPOBA transaction advisor for this project. And since 2009, I've been the transaction advisor for OBA projects in the water and health sectors in various countries in the Africa and Asian regions. GPOBA has a series of webinars with the intention of reaching out to various colleagues both in headquarters and the country office to conduct knowledge sharing and also knowledge exchange about our operational experience. And today's topic, the focus will be on the rural water supply project in Vietnam, which was designed and implemented in conjunction with the Vietnamese government's efforts to operationalize its national rural water supply and sanitation strategy. I would also like to introduce Hua. It's my pleasure to introduce Hua. She is the task team leader for this project. She also leads two additional in-country projects using P4R or performance or program for results for scaling up rural water supply and sanitation. Her work has involved preparing and implementing one of the largest rural water supply and sanitation projects commissioned by the Vietnamese government and testing output-based aid as a solution. Hua received her licentiate in public health in Sweden and master's in public health from Hanoi Medical University. In this presentation, we will talk to you about the project, output-based aid, and the lessons from experience we gained. We would really like to encourage you to participate, ask us as many questions as you would like, and as you can see on the right side of the screen, you can see a chat room. Please write your questions in the chat, and we will answer them during question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So let me now turn over to Hua, who will begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. So I would like to introduce one of project funded by GPOBA to improve access to clean water in Vietnam. So as the principle of the GPOBA to promote the community-based approach and the private participation in this case, a public-private partnership aiming to increase sustainable access to pipe water scheme targeting to low-income area. With the goal of outputs, we want to reach 75 schemes, serving 30,000 households. Let me bring you to Vietnam basic information. In Vietnam, basically, most of population living in rural area, 74%, but only 48% of population have access to clean water. Meanwhile, the urban area, a majority have clean water, 82%. So in this context, the government received support from GPOBA, and at that time, the government also want to test different kind of model to for improving water for rural community. So the OBA is first model to test the output-based approach. Let me bring you with 6 core concept through the project design and implementation. The first one, how to targeting of subsidy and how to focus and target to the poor household. The project basically was implemented starting from the year 2006 to 2012 with grant support 4.5 million through awarded to East West Foundation to implement improved access to clean water in selected provinces in rural Vietnam, which are most poor in 5 provinces have been selected. So how we target to the poor by providing incentive to serve the poor. Basically, the project will dispersed based on the outputs. The subsidy are provided especially to fill the financial gap between the full cost of service provision and ability, considering of ability to pay from poor or low-income household. You can see the figure in this presentation. So it had been changed initially. The connection fee was about 127 US dollar per household connection, but it is far below. Uh, it had been uh, reviewing to increase to 140, and the poor household page and also receiving subsidy. You can see the amount here. By this way, it really helped to providing incentive to the poor and also implementing agency. So how the disbursement have been based? Basically, the disbursement schedule was structured based on the output result and result. There were two steps of payment. The first one, 80% payment will be based upon the successful connection of household, and remaining 20% of payment will be done after 6 months of successful satisfactory operation after 6 months. I would like to bring you to next principle of output by approach when you are doing uh, any OPAs, that is accountability. The accountability have been discussed and agreed the result, output, and the key indicator. You can see there is 8 indicators here, but the two first indicator like a number of beneficiary household connected, number of beneficiary household within a 6 month of satisfactory service delivery. So the second indicator we have to measure from people satisfactory with the service provided. The other is more on operating the system like a volume of the water produced, a water bin, a connection ratio, O&M, you can see water tariff per cubic meter. So the first two key indicators are fundamental for a payment. The next concept is very important to enhancing or introducing or encouraging innovation and efficiency. It is very important for project to consider to involve different level of involvement, especially from community, from local authority, from community people, and from public and private participation. And the second thing, the proportion of subsidy utilized for payment for civil work. Uh, for treatment plan or household connection was agreed upfront with the common people committee or private operator, which they are involved significantly in this project. There are two models I would like to explain. There are different, the project have been implemented in two regional areas in Vietnam. One in the central region, so it have been carrying out implementation through East West, but the key implementing that is common people committee working together with contractor to build the system and using the key principle I just mentioned. And the second model, it has been in Mekong Delta area where the project tried to test and expanding to involve private involvement through the East West with involvement of implementation from private operator. The next concept also very important to providing um, how to measure or quantify the measure the output we call output verification and monitoring. The project have been decided to high independent verification here. You can see IVA was conducted quarterly based on quarterly basis, and based on this report from implementing the agency, then verification agent have to base on that and randomly check of number of household connection and also satisfactory criteria within a 6 month service delivery. And based on the verification report and recommendation have been made quarterly, we found that it is helpful not only in terms of verification but in terms of monitoring and enabling a condition to help implementing agency to improve capacity in terms of technical design, operation maintenance, and enhancing for operator. Now, I just presented the key concept of project or principle. So we would like to present you or on the reason access to clean water that is the project aiming for. So project went beyond its original target of 30,000. Uh, we are receiving 35,065 household connection. So meaning that it is over than expectation. Uh, so it's showing it work, but it's not everything perfect. So 156 household connections reported by Smith Red was found eligible to receive funding after IVA review and verifies. The project also established a total 82 schemes in Y41 in central provinces, 41 in Mekong Delta area provinces. So you can see compare it is exceeding the project target of 75 scheme. I would like to share with you some lesson learned. The reason have been achieved, but there's some change. Initial design more focus on piloting community-based approach. That is the initial GPOPA promoting and have limited on private sector involvement. Also, it is one of principle of GPOPA also need to pay any GPOPA project need to pay more attention. So from beginning, it's more on community based, and we found that identifies a weak area of implementation have been addressed in IBA report in the supervision from the bank side and also from the Smith rate, and expanding the service in Mekong Delta provinces where more private market or private operator existed existed and in the Mekong we think it's um, more involvement, but it is like a private funded full feasibility study and using the CES fund. But I would like to say that they also suffer a lot of pre-financing problem to borrow from local commercial bank or to ensure the project moving. So private sector funding is new in Vietnam at this time. Not like now in Vietnam, small private participate in the rural water, but during this time it really rare. So the second thing, the mechanism have could be further refined in future intervention. allowing to increase more public-private collaboration in more transparent or in more written clearly in all kind of term for funding. And the next thing, the sustaining community commitment to contribute financial pre-financing or contribute for house connection, incest household or in kind need to be pay more attention during design, implementation, and operation. It is we learn that it is critical and mechanism to ensure between the verbal. At that time, we are paying more attention on describe output. But to be able to produce output, it need to consider more some kind of procedure or written agreement. Need to think before that. That is very important. We found out that during implementation of that to ensure successful of project implementation in future. So as I mentioned before, verification, the output and monitoring is very important. Out of the 82 scheme, 72 was found to be satisfactory operating after first shipment of service provider. 93% of target households has expressed a satisfactory access to water supply within 6 months. However, 10 scheme or system did not meet verification of criteria required. It is considered it ineligible for payment. So let me summarize the reason. The project completed in November 2012 considered moderate or successful completed. Target household exceeded more than 10%. You can see the figure and beneficiary also access expectation. The project tested two management models, community-based local community-based management and private sector involvement and management. Clearly two different models showing in the reason have been conducted to monitor from the client satisfaction. For example, 2011, the first survey found the difference a little bit, but 2030, the survey found significantly different between two models. 98% satisfaction with private sector, 62% satisfaction with local cooperative management, or for common people committee, 67%, much lower. The lesson learned clearly indicated that the OPA is working, providing incentive measures, and also it is one way to control costs. The output by incentive also providing to implement faster. The rural household win by cost recovering tariff to get good water. So 81% of customer through the tariff payment, and the survey saw water quality was linked very much linked with the service and willingness to pay. Now I would like to introduce Leslie, continue to present to compare this project with global lesson learned. So please.
Thank you, Wa. Okay, so this project had created a strong interest in other countries and in the donor community. The particular interest has been with the flexibility that the OBA model has provided, and in many times the efficiency as well. In Vietnam, we have expanded to use the OBA in the education sector, which had provided good results. We are also in the process of structuring and designing another project at a larger scale, both in the water, and education sectors in Vietnam. Now, a couple of the lessons learned um, we gained throughout the years, um, which Y and I would like to share with you, would be the following. Um, Sustainability is very important. It has to be considered upfront during project design and emphasize operations and maintenance in the management model. These days, the World Bank and the World Bank Group has been discussing a lot about climate change resilience when we build quality infrastructure. During the project period, climate change resilience was not a key priority for consideration, but will need to play as a key factor in future projects and operations. Now, when we talk about scaling up, we all know, practitioners all know that we have to involve government systems. And when we talk about and work with the private sector, we have to ensure that when the private sector participation also includes working under government leadership. The OBA pilot was studied carefully by the bank task team when when the team decided to design a program for results. As we all know, program results is operating at a larger scale, and it's also a new lending instrument of the bank. Now, the design features, the lessons learned from the OBA pilot contributed to the work of the bank task team when they started thinking about and designing Vietnam's P4R in the water sector. Let me also talk to you a few things about contract management. A lot of the accountability of OBA projects rely on how we design contracts. And in designing contracts, it's imperative, it's a must that these contracts are tailored to the specific needs of the system so that the contracts become effective and implementable. And since we rely so much on contracts as a basis of our disbursements, a clear definition of how targets in terms of quality and quantity need to be very clear in terms of measurability and in terms of the verification process in the performance contracts. We also learned that when we work with contracts with private sector operators and when we work in performance-based schemes, the private operators have greater incentives to improve performance when it needs to cover capital expenditures and when the compensation scheme is viable. Additional elements we've learned would be regarding the supply and demand elements. When we conduct output-based aid projects, it's imperative to conduct a phase approach based on effective demand. Sorry. And what does this mean? It means that we really have to have a thorough understanding of the willingness and ability to pay by households so that the demand is clear and the affordability is clear. And on the supply side, it's also imperative that we have a thorough understanding of the current capabilities of the service provider or the operator. In that way, by having a thorough understanding of both the demand and supply factors, we can minimize the gap between the system costs and revenues. Another lesson is the use of innovative finance. We can use innovative finance to address some of the different type of constraints that can hinder both public and private sector investments. For example, we can use guarantees, and in some cases, we use the OBA subsidy as a guarantee to stimulate access to finance by private operators with commercial banks. That's one way of structuring the project so that uh, constraints on private sector investment can be addressed. The last lesson that I would like to share, of course, there are many more lessons to be shared, but in the interest of time, um, I'm going to end here. Sustainable service delivery requires that a project's financing structure be integrated with empowerment and participation by the beneficiary community. For example, it is imperative, it is critical that beneficiaries have their stake into the project. This can be done by charging user contributions, which is minimal, but still can be done so that the beneficiaries have a strong sense of ownership, empowerment, and participation into the scheme itself. So we'd like to thank you for listening to the presentation. Um, we would now like to look at your questions and respond to them um, specifically. So the first question, what is ineligible household in the case of the project? In this project, we have used a targeting methodology. So basically identifying who are the poor in the project sites. So if they don't meet the income threshold in terms of poor income threshold, then we don't necessarily have to enroll them or ask their participation in the project. And let me explain this further. These are subsidies, right? And coming from the grant. So it's imperative that the subsidies are used for those who need them most. That's why we use a lot of targeting methodologies to address the poor. So we can use the subsidies for beneficiaries who need them most.
So I would like to answer the question 3. The private sector provider, it is Vietnamese or foreigner, it is a Vietnamese. So in its last time, it is we call the small enterprise, very small. So the government requires it's last time to put some criteria for private involvement and try to open simpler because it's last time very limited. So even we can mobilize they are eligible to participate even very small. Let me give you example how small it is. It is only have a 2 or 3 worker. It's good enough for participate. So the next question on every rural family site in the project area is last time is about nearly about 3.8 or 4 in the project area. So question number 5, where scheme conducted or rehabilitated is open for both new scheme constructed and rehabilitation. But in reality, in the central part, it is a new scheme. And it is in Mekong, also new scheme, but some rehabilitated scheme. So, Leslie, do you want to answer some question like question 2 about the track cost time payment? Yeah.
What is the track record of timely payments by the consumers? The The track record of timely payments were usually better in the Mekong Delta than in the central region. What we have learned is that uh, implementation challenges were a bit fraught and a bit higher in the central region, largely due to affordability. The project experience was better in the Mekong Delta region. Now, just to give you a sense of the percentage of what the user contribution is, um, initially when we implemented the project, we basically had um, we basically had had to revise the costs after midterm review. So in the beginning, we had a very low costing figures because we were initiating the project. But after the midterm review, we adjusted it to about 140. Now the 140 is basically reflective of the market prices, and the subsidy was about the user contribution was about 14% of that, and the rest was the subsidy. Um, one can argue that 14% might be too big, but we have already increased the subsidy after midterm review, and looking at the market behavior, we deemed that the 14% of user contribution was feasible especially in the Mekong Delta. Now, in terms of the percentage of investment by private operators, um, they have invested by pre-financing. So basically, we did not completely finance or subsidize their operations and maintenance. We have provided subsidies to cover for the connection cost and also for a certain percentage of the service delivery within 6 month period. So based on the figures I gave you, the connection cost and fees were 140. The user contribution was 14%. The rest were subsidies. As you can see, uh, with regard to that specific pie, the subsidy covered substantially the costs.
Okay. So the question on the project being scaling up and who is going to fund that? It is very interesting question, I would like to say. So in terms of pilot is good, but how to scale up? Let me say that government also and NGO and also the bank team send a lot of people to come to see how to the lesson learned and how to scaling up the output way. So a lot of and it was discussed in the rural water supply partnership on this question how to do scaling up. But it's not easy. I would like to say we can say we can scaling up a lot on community base or private participation. But the community base in Vietnam, this model was not working, and also it's so in that one also not very promising. But private, it seemed very a little bit promising, but how to legalize through the local and government. It need to study further. So, but luckily, I like to inform you that the government now put the private the principle to involve private. It is a key sector principle to ensure for sustainability. So this model will be uh, have been studied carefully, and we are even use study that and even scaling up further in the before our program for research by transforming more in terms of put it in more description and legal writing describe of output and including more not only output but also the input and capacity building also that is some kind in this question you ask about enabling environmental condition enabling condition for scaling up have been studied and discussed by the bank team and have been put in larger program for exam. We have two program for exam now. Um, program reason in one regional area that is Mekong, the other for scaling up in 21 provinces. I would I did not say that it is exactly the same OPI, but some lessons learned from this have been studied for the bank team to put it further. We don't call it is output, but we call program for result. So the question also asks, what are the differences in terms of monitoring and evaluation of this project and other bank project? The monitoring and evaluation of this of the GPO project is last time we use monitoring, we use IVA, independent verification, as I mentioned before, quarterly reviews report from Smith Web, and also went to the site, select randomly to verify the result from report. At the end of the project, we also conduct evaluation assessment and providing ICR report. So completion report, which will send to you all if you are interested, will be posted as a public. But other bank project, P4R, the lending instrument, it is a bank requirement. We are doing substantial monitoring through the, let me explain the B4R. It is an enhancement of existing government program called National Target Program for Rural Water and Sanitation. And we are using the government monitoring system to but strengthening this monitoring system and also independently to evaluate the project, and the project pay the payment also through the disbursement link indicator. And the indicator, some indicator it is output, but some indicator it is input or capacity building. There's some different, even in Vietnam people, it also confusing. But I think in principle two are very similar in terms of pre-financing. Yes, yes.
Okay, there's a question here that asks why did why was East meets West chosen as the partner in Vietnam? Um, this is one of GPOBA's early projects. Um, East meets West had still have actually a track record of working in the rural water sector in the country, and they've also built key partnerships in the central region as well as the Mekong Delta region, both with the CPCs as well as with private operators. Um, and then over time, the the GPOBA team started working closely with the bank task team step by step, working with them on the fiduciary issues, particularly fiduciary issues like financial management, procurement, and safeguards. We would not have been able to have this project approved if the fiduciary team of the World Bank have signed it off. But at the same time, while implementing this project, we realized in GPOBA that we need to work closely with the bank task team. So we have engaged them step by step, especially uh, the, the water and sanitation teams and the urban and rural teams in the country. And by doing that, we have gained access and relationships with other partners in the country. And by also by doing that, by conducting and hiring the IVA, we have begun to see what are the technical, financial, and managerial recommendations that need to be addressed during implementation. And this led to the impetus of having a midterm review so that some of these recommendations can be implemented. Um, this is an OBA pilot. It's meant to test certain things, and it's meant to generate lots of lessons so that we can pick them up and translate them to future operations. And we are happy and fortunate enough that the lessons from this project is now being used to inform a larger a larger scale new instrument like the P4R. Uh, and the bank task team has been considering these lessons very carefully.
So the question on creating a rural water utility mm, is interesting. We don't think it is utility. It is a system. It is a very small as a testing, and also as I did explain before, it is very small, private enterprise with only 4 or 5 workers can consider because the the the, um, the system is very small. But I would like to say that now the private participation in terms of regulatory have been identified clearly by the government and receiving degree, even the degree guidance on how private participation will be, both in terms of financing and also all other related regulatory requirements. And we hope in future moving in more sustainable operational and maintenance and also investment in rural water sector. I think the private participation will become very critical role and have a legal framework put in place. That is also the bank team now try to work with the government to move it further.
Okay, again, we would like to thank all of you for joining us in this webinar. It's it's a pleasure to have you with us. Um, we will be posting the presentation and the recording in the website at gpoba.org, so you could easily access them. Um, and then we would also like to encourage you to join the OBA RBF Community of Practice on Collaboration for Development platform so we could continue our post-webinar discussion. Um, Also, we have a feedback survey. If we could kindly ask you to fill it up, it will just take 1 minute of your time. And this would extremely help us have more webinars in the future. Um, Now, I would like to pass it to who's the TTL of the project, to share her words.
I have final word. So I would like to thank for your participation and your question. It's very interesting question. So, but I would like to inform you that I'm not the only TTL for this project. I come in last stage. There are 4 different TTL. I would like also to thank for this tries a new approach. It's not I believe it was not easy at that time, and also recently we discussed there is so many different model in Vietnam, and under GB Water we launched a study in 16 countries to document all kind of lesson learned, especially looking at sustainability aspect. So Vietnam is selected one of out of 16 countries, and we hope, and we already propose this as assessment. There will be another assessment after 3 years to see how this functioning and work and compare with other model under the rural water supply. So thank a lot and hope to see you all. Thank you.